The streets of New York City buzzed with life, a chaotic symphony of honking cars, hurried footsteps, and distant chatter. Towering skyscrapers loomed above, their glass facades reflecting the golden hues of the late afternoon sun. Laura Bennett adjusted her scarf against the biting wind as she walked briskly down the sidewalk, clutching her phone tightly in one hand. Her mind raced with thoughts about the cryptic text message she had received earlier that day. "Meet me at Joe's Diner on 42nd Street. Bring your recorder. It's urgent." Laura wasn't the type to jump at every mysterious lead, but something about this one felt different. The sender was Karoline Leavitt, a name she recognized from recent headlines. Karoline was a former tech consultant who had recently become infamous for leaking classified information about corporate espionage. Laura had tried reaching out to her several times in the past for interviews, but Karoline had always refused. Now, suddenly, she wanted to meet. Joe's Diner wasn't anything special. It was a small, unassuming place tucked between two larger buildings, its neon sign flickering faintly in the fading light. Inside, the air smelled of stale coffee and greasy fries. A few patrons sat scattered around, quietly nursing their meals or scrolling through their phones. Laura spotted Karoline immediately. She was seated in a corner booth, her hood pulled low over her face. She looked nervous, glancing around as if expecting someone to burst through the door at any moment. "Karoline?" Laura asked cautiously as she approached the table. Karoline nodded quickly and gestured for Laura to sit. "You came," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I wasn't sure you would." "I couldn't resist," Laura replied, sliding into the booth. "What's this about?" Karoline hesitated, her fingers fidgeting with the edge of her jacket. Then, without warning, she pulled a small device from her pocket and placed it on the table. It looked like an ordinary USB drive, but Laura knew better than to assume anything when dealing with someone like Karoline. "This," Karoline began, her eyes darting toward the other customers before locking onto Laura's, "is going to change everything." Laura raised an eyebrow. "That's quite a claim. What's on it?" "A recording," Karoline said simply, "but not just any recording. This is proof of something big, something dangerous, something involving Maddow Carter." Maddow Carter. The name alone was enough to make Laura's pulse quicken. Maddow was one of the most influential figures in modern media, a sharp-tongued, political analyst whose opinions shaped public discourse on a daily basis. If there was dirt on her, it could blow open a scandal unlike anything Laura had ever covered. "And what exactly does this recording prove?" Laura asked, trying to keep her tone calm despite the excitement bubbling inside her. Karoline leaned closer, lowering her voice even further. "It proves that Maddow has been manipulating people on a massive scale, using AI algorithms to shape narratives, sway opinions, and control outcomes, and she's not doing it alone. There's a group behind her. They call themselves the Nexus." Laura frowned. "The Nexus? Never heard of them." "That's because they don't want you to," Karoline said grimly. "They're powerful, rich, untouchable. But I managed to get close enough to gather evidence. That's why I reached out to you. You're one of the few journalists left who still cares about the truth." Laura studied Karoline carefully. She seemed sincere, but paranoia was contagious, and Laura couldn't shake the feeling that she was stepping into something far bigger and more dangerous than she realized. Still, the allure of uncovering such a monumental story was impossible to ignore. "Let me hear it," Laura said finally, pulling out her recorder. "If this is real, we need to act fast." Karoline hesitated again, then pressed play on the device. The sound quality was poor, muffled by background noise, but the voices were clear enough to understand. One of them belonged to Maddow, her trademark confidence unmistakable. The other voice was harder to identify, though it carried an air of authority. "We can't afford any leaks," Maddow said sharply. "Not now. Not when we're so close." "The algorithm works," the second voice replied. "Public sentiment is shifting exactly how we predicted. Once the next phase begins, no one will even question it." Laura listened intently, her heart pounding in her chest. The implications were staggering. If what she was hearing was true, Maddow wasn't just a commentator. She was a puppet master, pulling strings in ways most people couldn't even imagine. When the recording ended, Laura sat back, stunned. This changes everything," she murmured. "Do you know who the other person is?" Karoline shook her head. "No idea, but whoever they are, they're high up in the Nexus. That much I'm sure of." Laura took a deep breath, trying to process what she had just heard. If we publish this, it'll be war. Maddow won't go down without a fight. "I know," Karoline said grimly. "And neither will the Nexus. That's why I needed someone I could trust, someone smart enough to stay ahead of them." Laura nodded slowly. She knew the risks involved, but she also knew she couldn't walk away. Stories like this didn't come along every day. This was her chance to expose corruption on a level she had only dreamed of tackling. "All right," Laura said firmly. "We'll do it, but we need to be careful. If they find out we're onto them—" "They already might," Karoline interrupted, her expression darkening. "That's why I've been watching my back ever since I got this. You should too." Laura swallowed hard, the weight of the situation settling heavily on her shoulders. For the first time in years, she felt truly alive, but also terrified. Whatever happened next, one thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same again. As they parted ways outside the diner, Laura couldn't help but glance over her shoulder, half expecting to see someone following her. The city seemed darker, now its shadows stretching longer and deeper than before. But amidst the uncertainty, one thought gave her courage. The truth was worth fighting for, and she intended to fight with everything she had. The next morning, Laura woke up to a dull ache in her temples. She hadn't slept well, the text message from the night before replaying in her mind like a broken record. "Be careful who you trust, they're watching." The words were vague, enough to leave room for doubt, but they carried an unmistakable chill. Was it someone trying to warn her? Or was it just another tactic to intimidate her into backing off? She shook her head, forcing herself to focus. Paranoia wouldn't help her now. If anything, it would only slow her down. Laura got dressed quickly, grabbed her laptop, and headed to a small cafe near her apartment. It was one of her usual spots, a quiet place where she could think without distractions. Over a strong cup of coffee, she opened her notes and began organizing everything she and Ethan had uncovered so far. The metadata embedded in the recording pointed to Nexora Tech, a company tied to Maddow Carter and the Nexus. But that wasn't enough to build a story on its own. Laura needed more, something tangible, something undeniable. She decided to dig deeper into Nexora Tech's operations, hoping to find a paper trail or any hint of illegal activity. She knew it wouldn't be easy. Companies like that didn't leave loose ends lying around. As she worked, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was Karoline. Laura hesitated before answering, unsure if she should trust her fully yet. Still, Karoline had given her the recording, and Laura couldn't ignore that. "Are you okay?" Karoline asked immediately, her voice tense. "I'm fine," Laura replied cautiously. "Why?" "I heard rumors," Karoline said, her tone dropping lower. "They know you're looking into them. You need to be careful." Laura frowned. "Who told you this?" "I can't say," Karoline answered sharply. "Just, please don't do anything reckless. If they feel threatened, they'll come after you." "Thanks for the warning," Laura said dryly. "But I'm not stopping." Karoline sighed heavily. "I didn't think you would. Just promise me you'll watch your back." "I will," Laura promised, though she wasn't entirely convinced. Karoline's warning was genuine. For all she knew, it could be part of some larger game. Still, she appreciated the sentiment, or at least what seemed like genuine concern. After hanging up, Laura returned to her research. Hours passed as she sifted through public records, corporate filings, and news articles about Nexora Tech. Most of it was deliberately vague, written in corporate jargon meant to confuse rather than inform. But buried deep within a quarterly report was a single line that caught her attention. Advanced Narrative Modeling Project. It sounded innocuous enough, but Laura's instincts told her otherwise. Narrative modeling wasn't just about storytelling, it was about shaping how people perceived reality. Combined with AI algorithms, it could manipulate opinions on a massive scale. Could this be the project Maddow and the Nexus were using to control public sentiment? Determined to find out more, Laura reached out to Ethan. He picked up on the first ring, his voice groggy with sleep. "What is it?" he mumbled. "I found something," Laura said excitedly. "A project called Advanced Narrative Modeling. Can you look into it?" Ethan yawned loudly. "Give me a few hours, I'll see what I can dig up." Later that afternoon, Ethan called her back. His tone was unusually serious. "You were right to flag that," he said. "This isn't just some random initiative. It's a multi-million-dollar operation funded by several major corporations, all connected to the Nexus. And get this. Their servers are hosted in a secure facility outside the city. Physical access is restricted, but I might be able to hack into their system remotely." Laura felt a surge of adrenaline. "Can you do it without getting caught?" "Probably," Ethan replied. "But it's risky. If they trace it back to me, we're both screwed." "We don't have a choice," Laura insisted. "If we don't act now, they'll cover their tracks completely. We need proof." Ethan hesitated, then sighed. "All right, I'll start tonight, but you owe me big time for this." "Deal," Laura said, smiling despite the tension gripping her chest. That evening, Laura met Ethan at his apartment again. He was already seated at his desk, surrounded by monitors displaying lines of code and encrypted files. The air smelled, faintly, of burnt coffee and stale pizza. Laura perched on the edge of a chair, watching nervously as Ethan worked his magic. For nearly 2 hours, the only sounds in the room were the clicking of keys and the occasional hum of a fan. Finally, Ethan leaned back, a triumphant grin spreading across his face. "Got it," he announced. "I managed to breach their firewall and download some internal documents. Take a look at this." He turned one of the monitors toward her. On the screen was a detailed report outlining the goals of the Advanced Narrative Modeling Project. Laura scanned the text, her heart pounding faster with each sentence. The document described how AI algorithms analyzed social media trends, news cycles, and even individual browsing habits to predict and influence public behavior. It wasn't just propaganda. It was psychological manipulation on an unprecedented scale. "This is insane," Laura whispered, her hands trembling slightly. "They're literally rewriting reality." "And they've been doing it for years," Ethan added grimly. "This isn't new. It's just better hidden than most people realize." Laura nodded slowly, her mind racing. With evidence like this, she could expose the entire operation. But she also knew publishing it would put a target on her back. Maddow, Carter, and the Nexus weren't going to let her walk away unscathed. "We need to move fast," she said finally. "If we wait too long, they'll find out what we're doing." Ethan agreed. "Let's summarize the key points and draft an article. Once it's ready, we can release it to the public." The next day, Laura spent hours writing and revising her exposé. Every word had to be precise, every claim backed by solid evidence. By the time she finished, the sun had set, casting long shadows across her apartment. She sent the draft to Ethan for review, then collapsed onto her couch, exhausted, but exhilarated. Her phone buzzed suddenly, pulling her out of her thoughts. It was an email notification from an anonymous sender. Curious, she opened it and froze. Attached to the email was a photo of her entering Ethan's building, taken earlier that day. Beneath it was a single line of text: "Stop digging, or else." Laura's blood ran cold. They really were watching her. Whoever they were, they had eyes everywhere. For a moment, fear gripped her, threatening to overwhelm her resolve. But then she remembered why she had started this journey. In the first place, to uncover the truth no matter the cost. Taking a deep breath, Laura deleted the email and stood up. She couldn't afford to let fear dictate her actions. The stakes were too high. Grabbing her coat, she headed out into the night, determined to confront Maddow Carter directly. The gala event was being held at a lavish hotel downtown, attended by politicians, celebrities, and business elites. Laura arrived late, slipping unnoticed into the crowded ballroom. Her eyes scanned the room until they landed on Maddow Carter, standing near the center of a group of admirers. Laura approached cautiously, her recorder hidden discreetly in her pocket. When Maddow noticed her, she raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised. "Laura Bennett," she said coolly. "What brings you here?" "I think you know," Laura replied, her voice steady despite the nerves coursing through her veins. "I have questions about your involvement with Nexora Tech and the Nexus." Maddow's expression remained calm, almost amused. "Is that so? And what makes you think I'd answer? Them?" Before Laura could respond, Karoline appeared unexpectedly, holding a tablet displaying additional incriminating footage. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to them. Maddow stared at the screen, then burst out laughing, a reaction so bizarre, it left everyone stunned. Her laughter echoed through the ballroom, sharp and unsettling. It wasn't joy or amusement. It was something darker, almost unhinged. As the crowd watched in confusion, Laura realized Maddow wasn't just mocking them. She was buying time. And in that moment, Laura understood. This fight was far from over. The next morning, Laura sat at her cluttered desk in the corner of her small apartment. The sun streamed through the blinds, casting long shadows across stacks of papers and empty coffee cups. Her laptop hummed softly as she stared at the screen, replaying the recording Karoline had given her over and over again. Each time, it felt like a puzzle piece slipping into place, but there were still gaps, holes in the story that needed filling before she could go public. She knew she couldn't do this alone. Investigative journalism wasn't just about finding evidence, it was about understanding it, and for that she needed help. That's when she thought of Ethan Monroe. Ethan was a name whispered in tech circles, a genius who preferred solitude to fame. He lived in a cramped studio apartment filled with monitors, wires, and half-built gadgets. Most people avoided him because of his eccentric personality. But Laura had worked with him once before on a cybersecurity expose. If anyone could dig deeper into the recording and uncover its secrets, it was Ethan. Laura grabbed her coat and headed out, braving the chilly autumn air. Ethan's building was located in a quieter part of Brooklyn, far from the noise and chaos of Manhattan. It looked like any other brick structure, except for the faint glow of blue light emanating from one of the windows. She climbed the creaky stairs to the third floor and knocked on his door. After a moment, Ethan opened it, looking exactly as Laura remembered. Messy hair, glasses perched precariously on his nose, and wearing an old hoodie stained with what might have been pizza sauce. His eyes widened slightly when he saw her standing there. "Laura?" he asked, surprised. "What brings you here?" "I need your help," she said bluntly, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Ethan's apartment was chaotic, cluttered with computer parts and books piled high on every available surface. A single chair sat amidst the mess, which Laura claimed immediately. Ethan closed the door and leaned against it, crossing his arms. "You don't usually visit unless something big is going on. What's up?" She pulled out the USB drive Karoline had given her and held it up. I think it's important, but I need someone who can analyze it properly." Ethan took the drive cautiously, examining it like it might explode. "Important how?" "It's a recording," Laura explained, "involving Maddow Carter and some kind of conspiracy. There's talk about AI algorithms being used to manipulate public opinion, but I don't know enough about tech to understand all of it. That's where you come in." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Maddow Carter? As in the Maddow Carter? You're not messing around, are you?" "No, I'm not," Laura replied firmly, "and neither should you. This isn't just some random conspiracy theory. People's lives could be affected by whatever they're doing. We need to figure out what's really going on." Ethan hesitated, then nodded. "All right, let me see what I can do." He plugged the USB drive into one of his computers, his fingers flying across the keyboard as lines of code appeared on the monitor. Laura watched silently, sipping the lukewarm coffee Ethan offered her. Hours passed, and the room grew darker as the sun dipped below the horizon. Finally, Ethan leaned back in his chair, exhaling sharply. "This is interesting," he said slowly. "There's more to this than just audio. Embedded in the file is metadata, timestamps, location data, even fragments of encrypted messages. Whoever made this didn't just record a conversation. They captured traces of everything happening around them." Laura leaned forward eagerly. "Can you decode it?" "It'll take time," Ethan admitted. "But yeah, I think so. Give me a day or two and I'll have something concrete." Relieved, Laura thanked him and left, her mind racing with possibilities. Back at her apartment, she tried to focus on writing a preliminary article, but her thoughts kept drifting back to Karoline's warning. Powerful forces will stop at nothing to suppress the truth. She didn't doubt it. Maddow Carter wasn't someone who played fair, and if the Nexus was as dangerous as Karoline claimed, Laura knew she was walking into a minefield. Meanwhile, across town, Maddow Carter sat in her luxurious penthouse office, staring out at the glittering skyline. Her sharp features were illuminated by the soft glow of her desk lamp as she scrolled through emails on her tablet. Despite her outward calm, there was a tension in her movements, a subtle unease that hadn't been there before. Rachel Kim, her trusted PR strategist, entered the room quietly, carrying a folder of documents. Rachel was efficient, calculating, and fiercely loyal. She had helped Maddow navigate countless scandals over the years, always staying one step ahead of the media. "You wanted to see me?" Rachel asked, placing the folder on the desk. Maddow turned to face her, her lips pressed into a thin line. "We may have a problem," Rachel frowned. "What kind of problem?" "One of our former associates has resurfaced," Maddow replied cryptically. "Karoline Leavitt. Apparently she's been talking to someone, a journalist named Laura." "Bennett," Rachel's expression darkened. "Leavitt? I thought she disappeared after the last incident." "What does she want now?" "She claims to have evidence," Maddow said, tapping her fingers impatiently on the desk. "Evidence of certain activities we've been involved in. Activities that could raise questions if they became public." Rachel opened the folder and scanned its contents quickly. "If this gets out, it won't just be bad for us, it'll expose the Nexus. They won't tolerate that." "I know," Maddow snapped, "which is why we need to act fast. Find out what Leavitt knows and who else she's told, then make sure it never sees the light of day." Rachel nodded, already formulating a plan. "Leave it to me. By tomorrow, this will all be taken care of." As Rachel left the room, Maddow leaned back in her chair, her thoughts swirling. She had built her empire on control, on knowing exactly what people thought and believed. To lose that grip now would be unacceptable. Whatever it took, she would protect herself and the Nexus. After all, power was a fragile thing, and those who held it could not afford to show weakness. The following evening, Laura returned to Ethan's apartment. He greeted her with a mix of excitement and apprehension, holding up a sheet of paper covered in notes and diagrams. "I found something," he said, handing it to her. "The metadata led me to a server farm owned by a shell company registered under the name Nexora Tech. Sound familiar?" Laura shook her head. "No. Should it?" "Maybe not directly," Ethan admitted. "But Nexora Tech is linked to several other companies, all of which funnel money into projects involving AI research and social engineering. And guess who sits on the board of directors for one of those companies?" "Let me guess," Laura said dryly. "Maddow Carter." "Bingo," Ethan confirmed. "It looks like the Nexus isn't just some shadowy organization. They're a network of corporations working together to influence global narratives, and Maddow is right at the center of it." Laura's stomach churned as the pieces fell into place. This wasn't just about exposing corruption. It was about dismantling an entire system designed to control information. The weight of it felt overwhelming but also exhilarating. For years she had chased stories that mattered, but none had ever felt this urgent. "What do we do now?" Ethan asked, breaking the silence. "We keep digging," Laura replied firmly, "but we need to be careful. If Maddow finds out we're onto her, things could get ugly." Ethan nodded grimly. "Understood. Just promise me one thing." "What's that?" That you won't let them scare you off. This is too big to ignore. Laura smiled faintly. Don't worry, I'm not going anywhere. Maddow's laughter filled the ballroom, echoing off the crystal chandeliers and marble walls. It was loud, sharp, and unsettling, a sound that didn't match the elegant surroundings or the weight of the moment. The crowd stared in stunned silence, unsure whether to laugh along, intervene, or simply look away. Laura stood frozen, her recorder still in hand, while Karoline clutched the tablet tightly, her knuckles white. Finally, Maddow stopped laughing, though a faint smirk lingered on her lips. She glanced at Laura, then at Karoline, as if sizing them up. Her voice cut through the tension like a knife. You really think this changes anything? She asked, her tone dripping with condescension. Do you honestly believe people will care about your little conspiracy theories? Laura took a step forward, her heart pounding, but her voice steady. It's not a conspiracy theory when it's backed by evidence, and we have plenty of it. Your connection to Nexora Tech, the Advanced Narrative Modeling Project, it's all right here. Maddow tilted her head slightly, feigning curiosity. And what exactly do you plan to do with this so-called evidence? Publish it? Expose me? Please. You don't understand how the world works, Laura. Truth doesn't matter anymore. All that matters is perception, and I control perception. The words hit Laura like a punch to the gut. There was no denial in Maddow's tone, no attempt to defend herself. Instead, she admitted everything indirectly, almost proudly. It was chilling and infuriating. You can't keep manipulating people forever, Laura shot back. Sooner or later, they'll see through you. Maddow chuckled again, softer this time. Oh, sweet girl, they already see through me. They just don't care. As long as I give them what they want, comfort, certainty, validation, they'll follow me anywhere. That's the beauty of it. Before Laura could respond, Rachel Kim appeared at Maddow's side, her expression calm but calculating. She held up her phone, showing something on the screen. We need to handle this quickly, she said quietly, though her eyes never left. Laura and Karoline. Maddow nodded, her smirk widening. Of course, let's give them something else to focus on. With that, Rachel stepped forward, addressing the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, please excuse the interruption. It seems there's been an unfortunate misunderstanding. This young woman, she gestured toward Laura, is attempting to spread false information for personal gain. Rest assured, we will address this appropriately. The room erupted into murmurs as Rachel's words sank in. Some guests looked skeptical, others amused, but most seemed indifferent. To them, it was just another drama unfolding at a high-profile event. Something to gossip about later over cocktails. Laura realized with growing frustration that Maddow was right. Truth didn't matter unless it fit the narrative people wanted to believe. Outside the hotel, Laura and Karoline stood in the cold night air, their breath visible in the dim light of the street lamps. Neither spoke for a long moment, both processing what had just happened. They're going to discredit us, Karoline said finally, breaking the silence. Rachel won't stop until everyone thinks we're liars. Laura clenched her fists, anger bubbling beneath the surface. Let them try. We have proof, hard evidence. They can spin it however they want, but facts are facts. Karoline shook her head. It's not that simple. You saw how easily they dismissed you in there. They've spent years building their empire. One article isn't going to bring it down. We have to try, Laura insisted. If we don't fight back, they win. Is that what you want? Karoline hesitated, then sighed. No. But we need more than just evidence. We need allies. People who can amplify our message before they shut us down completely. Laura nodded slowly. Karoline was right. They couldn't take on Maddow and the Nexus alone. They needed help, from someone powerful enough to challenge the status quo. The next morning, Laura called Ethan, explaining the situation and asking for his input. He listened intently, his brow furrowed in thought. This is bigger than any of us, he said finally. Derbyshire, this is bigger than any of us, Ethan said finally, his voice low but firm. If we're going to fight back, we need to hit them where it hurts, their credibility. And for that, we need someone who can't be ignored. Laura nodded, her mind racing. She knew Ethan was right. They needed a figure, a person or organization with enough influence to counter Maddow's reach. But who? The media landscape had become so fragmented, so polarized, that finding someone willing to take on such a powerful adversary felt nearly impossible. What about independent journalists? Laura suggested. People who've built their reputations on exposing corruption. If we bring them in, maybe they can help spread the word. Ethan shook his head. It's not enough. Maddow and the Nexus have too much control over the narrative. Even if other journalists pick up the story, they'll drown it out with disinformation before it gains traction. Then what do you suggest? Laura asked, frustration creeping into her tone. Ethan leaned back in his chair, tapping his fingers against the desk. We go after their infrastructure. Remember those server farms I found? The ones hosting the data for Nexora Tech? If we expose those publicly, show people exactly how they're manipulating information, it might force the issue. People don't like being lied to, even if they pretend not to care. Laura considered this for a moment. It was risky, but it could work. If they could prove that Maddow and the Nexus were using illegal technology to shape public opinion, it would be harder for them to dismiss the accusations as mere conspiracy theories. All right, she said finally. Let's do it. But we need to act fast. Every second we wait gives them more time to cover their tracks. Over the next few days, Laura, Karoline, and Ethan worked tirelessly to piece together a comprehensive exposé. Ethan focused on tracing the server farms back to their physical locations, while Laura wrote a detailed article outlining everything they had uncovered. Karoline, meanwhile, reached out to trusted contacts in the tech world, hoping to gather additional evidence that could bolster their case. By the end of the week, they had everything they needed: documents, photos, and even satellite images of the server facilities. Laura published the article on the Daily Chronicle's website late one night, knowing it would spark immediate attention. Within hours, the story went viral, spreading across social media platforms and news outlets around the globe. To their surprise, the reaction was mixed. Some praised Laura for her bravery, calling her a hero for standing up to corporate greed. Others dismissed the report as fear-mongering, claiming it was an attempt to undermine technological progress. Meanwhile, Maddow and Rachel launched a full-scale counterattack, flooding the internet with articles and videos questioning the authenticity of the evidence. But Laura and her team weren't finished yet. Ethan had secretly planted a digital breadcrumb trail, leading directly to the server farms. When investigative reporters followed the clues, they discovered incriminating files detailing the Nexus's operations. These files confirmed what Laura had been saying all along. Maddow and her allies were using advanced AI algorithms to manipulate public sentiment on a massive scale. The revelation sent shockwaves through the nation. Politicians demanded investigations. Tech companies distanced themselves from Nexora Tech, and ordinary citizens began questioning the information they consumed daily. For the first time, it seemed possible that Maddow's empire might crumble under the weight of its own lies. In the aftermath, Maddow disappeared from the public eye. Rumors swirled about her whereabouts. Some claimed she had fled the country, while others believed she was lying low until the storm passed. Rachel Kim also vanished, leaving behind only whispers of her role in the scandal. Karoline, fearing retaliation, chose to leave the spotlight entirely. She packed up her belongings and moved to a remote town, severing ties with everyone except Laura. I did what I had to do, she told Laura during their final meeting. But I can't keep living like this, you understand, don't you? Laura nodded, though she couldn't hide her sadness. I do. Thank you for trusting me. None of this would have been possible without you. As for Ethan, he continued his work as a cybersecurity expert, dedicating himself to exposing similar conspiracies wherever he found them. He became something of a legend in activist circles, known for his ability to uncover hidden truths in a world increasingly dominated by misinformation. Back in her apartment, Laura sat alone, staring at her computer screen. The chaos of the past. Weeks had subsided, replaced by an uneasy calm. She felt proud of what she had accomplished, but she also knew the battle wasn't truly over. Corporations like the Nexus didn't disappear overnight. They simply adapted, finding new ways to maintain their grip on power. Still, for now, justice had prevailed. Laura smiled faintly, closing her laptop and leaning back in her chair. The truth hadn't been easy to find, and sharing it had come at great personal risk. But in the end, it had been worth it, because no matter how dark the world became, there would always be people willing to fight for honesty, transparency, and accountability. And Laura Bennett intended to be one of them, for as long as it took.